See a few new faces. Welcome to the QASIG. We do these on the second Wednesday of every odd-numbered month. I've had a couple people tonight ask, just because there's some people looking for jobs, some people have jobs. So if anybody wants to make a quick announcement about a job opening, or if you're looking for a position, let's open it up for a couple minutes and see. Yeah.
The University of Washington is looking for a data warehouse tester.
Okay. And we might actually include this as a little posting that we can put on the QASIG website. Okay. And do you have a contact? Or just come talk to you?
There's a, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? There's a job posted on the door.
Yeah, that's us.
Okay.
So attachment, we have a TE position, so just talk to Ken or I, John, tonight, or I think, is there no contact on?
There's no contact other than this.
Yeah, just through the website. There's just posted on the website on the company website.
Okay. Great. Well, oh, sorry.
Over there?
Okay.
I got an email for something that's not me, but somebody's looking for some kind of testing at Amdocs, so I can connect you.
Yeah, it's a billing system, mobile team.
So my name's Melanie. I'm an employee. I feel like you guys should, like a Al-Anon group, you guys should try. Okay, thanks. So anyway, I'm looking for work, so I like these odds. A couple job opportunities, one person. Anyway, if you guys would like to talk to me after the meeting, and I'll check the rest of you guys out after.
All right, I don't want to talk to her, but I'm Art Snyder, and I'm looking for a job right now. I've been in QA for probably about 20 years, and I've been in senior management and director level roles for about 11 years or so. Just went through the joy of having a layoff at the company I was with. Effectively lost my team, so it kind of loses the motivation of having a manager of the team. Come find me, and I'm good at what I do. So, here to help.
Good. Yeah.
My name is Kenji. I'm from Google, and Google is looking for testers for SAP all the time. So if you're interested in working for a great company, let me know.
Yeah.
Talk to me after the meeting. Yeah.
That it?
And note that he gets a $4,000 perk if he brings somebody in.
Yeah.
Smart guy.
Sorry.
We're referral.
You got it. You got it.
You look like
I'll find out what kind of beer Kenji likes after the talk.
Cool. Then one other announcement before I introduce our speaker. Had a couple people who were surprised to hear this news. And John Bach's not here tonight because he's no longer with the company. He's actually relocated out of state to California and is working with eBay on a really exciting position where he's helping design the entire QA group down there. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. He's monitoring the entire presentation tonight. We have people joining the conversation through online, and they'll be submitting questions up to John, who will then relay them to Park, and Park can bring back to us if we got that part working.
Okay, everybody. Hi, John!
We miss you.
Tell your brother I said hi, it's Melanie.
Seattle's lonely without you, John.
Yeah, so this in.
That's it, I'm leaving.
John will actually also be participating in the SIG going forward, helping coordinate future speakers. So if you have ideas, get them to me or John or Shelley or all of us, and he'll still do the screening and make sure that everything's kind of coordinated for him. So he's distant, but still here in spirit and participation. So I'd like to introduce Adam Yuret, who's our speaker tonight, Senior Test Engineer at VolunteerMatch.org, which is a nonprofit. But I'll let you go into the details about your background. And then tonight's door prize is an entertainment book for 2011. We'll do that right after the
Awesome.
So thank you for coming.
Okay, so my name's Adam. I'm a senior test engineer at VolunteerMatch. It's about as appropriate as saying the junior test engineer at VolunteerMatch, the only test engineer at the only test engineer VolunteerMatch has ever had, and VolunteerMatch has been around since 1998. So there's a lot of work to be done coming in to a totally new organization that's making big changes like, hey, let's have a tester. VolunteerMatch is really a cool company. They, let me see if I got a slide about it. I got their cool design slide. Their motto there was strengthening communities by making it easier for good people and good causes to connect. I went too far. So anyway, VolunteerMatch is a kind of a big network of volunteer opportunities, something like 78,000 volunteer opportunities across the country. We get the website gets 6 million visitors a year, and they connect nonprofits to volunteer communities, and have 148 companies pay VolunteerMatch. For a self-sustaining nonprofit. We don't get any kind of government grants or anything like that. We sort of like any other company have to work to earn it, so we can stay afloat and keep people paid and volunteers connecting to opportunities. So it's a pretty cool job in that, you know, not just making a software that needs it better, but also making sort of communities and doing good things. So previously to working at VolunteerMatch, I did a short stint on a contract actually for Quardev, and it was a very different kind of opportunity. I had just discovered the Bach brothers, and John had been hugely helpful in kind of teaching me about session-based test management, and I felt like I was really leveling on my ability to find lots of bugs and really think about how I think when I approach testing. And I thought, well, this is going to be hugely helpful going into the VolunteerMatch job. And I was talking to our CTO of VolunteerMatch when I was made the offer, and he said, if you test, you will quickly find hundreds of bugs because they've never had a tester in 12 years. Hundreds of bugs exist. They're out there to be found rather easily. Your initial response is, well, great. I'm going to be busy. I'm going to find tons of bugs. I'm going to file them, and it's going to be awesome. There's lots of different ways to interpret that statement. He could mean, you know, you're going to find hundreds of bugs, so you're going to be having a great time. You know, you're going to find hundreds of bugs if we desperately need you. This is great. What he went on to elaborate was, however, if you file those bugs, our current major refactor and this huge project we're working on will probably grind to a complete halt. We don't have the resources to triage and handle these hundreds of bugs that you're going to find, you know, very easily. So the message was, we want to focus on new development and not on the legacy site and finding those hundreds of bugs, so that we can, the refactor is significant, and maybe we'll make those bugs not as significant in the long term. We'll improve. So the challenges going into VolunteerMatch, new leadership, bringing in a tester. They're switching from a waterfall methodology that's been on for 12 years to an agile scrum kind of daily stand-up sort of thing. They've got a full-time tester, me, and I'm the only dedicated testing resource, which is, I feel, a bigger deal with regard to my mandate to not test, is to bring a testing-minded culture to the entire organization. And as the only tester, I can't handle like the amount of work that our 6 developers are cranking out in a given 3-week iteration. There's a mountain of work that just comes out. So by working with the product team and bridging gaps, I'm able to kind of take a more, I don't know if the word holistic is appropriate, but a more whole team approach to tackling the big refactor and the improvements. I'm remote. VolunteerMatch is located in San Francisco. It's a huge challenge because I'm the only remote member of the engineering team. So getting myself in there, I heard a great suggestion at another one of these things one time where somebody said that as testers, they try to look for anytime 2 or 3 developers are clustering together, and they'll go and eavesdrop on them and see, you know, is that worky talk that's coming out of them, or are they talking about, you know, who got voted off on Survivor last week? Because things get developed and engineered on the fly at the coffee machine. People start changing requirements and doing things. And that's kind of a significant challenge for me because I can't do that. I'm physically incapable of even seeing when people are clustering together, even if they go into each other's desk. For the first few weeks, I would literally send an instant message and say, hey, I got a really easy question for you. Could you look to your left and tell me if Daryl is sitting at his desk? You know, maybe he's not seeing my instant message, maybe he's ignoring me. That's not that Daryl would ever ignore me. The team is awesome.
So they found your mute button.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. Is that it's hard to be, you know, running around banging a drum when nobody can hear you. You know, and fortunately, my Todd, my boss, is super on the ball. We put in a webcam on our continuous integration server. So they got this big 47-inch plasma screen that displays our build status, and so they put in a little webcam there. And after talking to Lisa Crispin about a remote telepresence dolly that she had, where there's a little wheelie cart for one of their remote guys that would be kind of the virtual that guy in their office. I thought it was a really cool idea.
Really into the bathroom.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a problem, right? You know, they could wheel me away. But the first stage was we put a little webcam up on that CI server so I could be at the stand-up, and my head, initially the 47-inch head for them, so we shrunk it down a little bit. But ultimately, I told them about this telepresence dolly idea, and there's a cart and a laptop and a little tilt pan zoom camera and a mic all ready to get plugged into each other in like a matter of a couple weeks. So they react and work quickly and respond really well to feedback. So for now, at least, I got a little spy cam. I can kind of VNC into the machine and Skype call myself and see where everybody's sitting. And you know, it creeps them out a little bit when I say goodnight when they walk by the CI server. Being there, you know, I pop in and say, "Good, Anthony."
You just never know if you got a bad hair day because you'll never see it.
Well, they see me in the morning at the stand-up meeting, you know. That's usually when I realize that I've forgotten to put on a shirt and I have like my undershirt on at my desk, and I go, "Oh yeah, I meant to put on a shirt every breakfast." I'm wearing a white T-shirt all the time, and they come every morning. So that's really great, and it's great to have a team that's like that, where I can, you know, see something or talk to Lisa Crispin, and she's like, "Hey, check out this remote virtual Manda dolly that we did at this job I had," and I can send that to my boss and say, "Hey, this is cool," and he's like, "All right, we'll have the hardware in next week and make you a little remote virtual dolly thing," and we'll see how that works in practice. Right now I'm still stationary, and someone always knocks my camera over and I'm jumping in and saying, "Please turn my head back toward the engineer so I can't see it." So, yeah, that's fun. Okay.
Hey Adam, have you heard about the elf on the shelf? Like who watches if you're naughty or nice?
No.
That might be a cheaper option.
No, tell me
It's
all
like a
about it.
stuffed elf that they have for Christmas to see if the kids have been naughty or nice, that watches the kids and reports to Santa.
Wow,
So
that's
you might
terrifying.
be the QA elf on the shelf.
That sounds a little Gestapo, you know? That's kind of cool though, I like that idea, give them a little, you know, and if you unit test that, the elf is watching. You know, that's a great idea. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free. The more you talk, the less I have to. It's pretty beneficial. So it's a complex product. You know, after 12 years of developing kind of on their own, the first thing I notice is I come in and literally one tab is totally inconsistent to another tab. Like you've got your public volunteer opportunity search and then your organizational search, and I go, well, the fields aren't even the same. You know, there's different logic or interfaces for the two, and I go, well, these don't look anything alike, and it's quickly apparent. Well, one guy did this thing and the other guy did that thing, and they put them up. Yeah, it's just they're different. You know, this one's that guy and that one's the other guy. You know, and so the product is really complex. You know, we've got these you've got big companies like Johnson & Johnson taking all of their sort of volunteer charity spend and funneling it through VolunteerMatch. It's kind of what we do as far as the 148 companies they pay for a site that's branded like them. You know, you go to Johnson & Johnson site and see a volunteer link, and you click on it and go to another page that looks like it's still there, but it's really VolunteerMatch, and that's what they pay us for, that service. And they may have, it's just clear that the logics have gotten really elaborate. You know, you've got these private opportunities and public opportunities and special events management opportunities with different kinds of users and opportunities within a special event, within a private event, and all the complexities of a back-end user interface you'd expect with that, that, you know, when an escalation comes in, it might seem simple to the customer service person who's putting in the escalation that says, well, an email doesn't go out when a private opportunity is signed up for a special event, and coming in not knowing anything about the product, you're like, oh, where's that? You know, how do I find that? And as you're wading through to try and fix this critical escalation, these bugs are popping up at you left and right. And being a tester, it's like, it slows you down because you go, oh, that's a bug. You know, I gotta investigate that. You know, there's so many other things that could be broken around that, and to do so, ultimately, maybe you'll find some good stuff, but you're also not taking care of this critical escalation that's going in, and every minute you spend chasing down that rabbit hole is a minute that this customer is continuing to be distressed because their fix isn't going out in the hot fix. So the challenging user experience is being tackled by hiring out a user experience firm, which is great because I think the classic approach is, you know, we're all software engineers. We know how the user thinks. We'll just make it like what we want it to be, and that's great. But yeah, naturally, our users are not software engineers. They're not web designers. They're not QA testers. They're admins at, you know, multinational nonprofits. They're a nonprofit admin for, you know, a major corporation. It's the user experience is going to be very foreign. What we would think would be great is not necessarily going to be analogous to what they would think would be great. Requirement to support Arcane IE6 browser.
Woo, IE6!
That's
Yeah.
that's not the standard IE browser, it's a different one?
No, it's an Arcane IE6 browser. It's like the standard IE6 browser, but more arcaner. So, good find. I meant to put that redundancy in my slideshow. There will be prizes for people who.
10 years old in October.
Yeah, and they're, you know, even Microsoft is putting up that little banner for how long until we finally deprecate IE6. Unfortunately, it really doesn't matter when, you know, if the whole rest of the world, we get down to 0.001% of the population is using IE6, if 51% of our users are using IE6, that we have to support it, and it's really important. In fact, when we put together a browser matrix for testing, arguably the most important thing is the stuff that pays the bills and keeps us getting paid. That section of our product, a tier 1 browser, is IE6. 51% of those people are using IE6. It's not just that we have to support it, we have to support it and it has to look good and they have to be happy with it.
Wow.
We can't just say, well, it's IE6, too bad, you know. Yeah, upgrade. Well, we can't do, you know, because the cultures are different. You know, when you've got a culture of a, you know, maybe a more of an old economy kind of culture in a big nonprofit or multinational, sorry, I didn't mean to talk.
No, I'm sorry. I was just making-
No worries. No. Well, so the issue is that, you know, since we have to support it, that we can't tell them upgrade it. You know, they may be a huge organization and they may be operating on volunteer donations. They may be running on machines from 1998. So we can't just tell them, hey, too bad, upgrade to IE8, you know, and their IT department goes, okay, fine, we'll just upgrade our whole organization to IE8, and every single thing, even not related to VolunteerMatch is gonna bork and stuff's not gonna work. So unfortunately, we're stuck with it. We hope to see, you know, we rate this on a regular basis. We check our analytics and see, well, how many of our users are using what browser. We're all really praying to see that IE6 just plummet down to a point where we can start tier 2ing and tier 3 and then finally ignore it.
Those numbers are by seat or by dollars coming in?
Well, it's kind of easy in that it's by our affinity users. So if affinity users are a term for the people who pay us, you know, the Johnson & Johnsons, the HPs, you know, those people, they give us money, they'll have logins, and they're the only people who are going to be using our kind of affinity functionality. So if those pages are primarily IE6, then that's what dictates that we have to support them.
Yeah, corporations that are not in technology do not embrace new IE versions.
Right.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Well, J&J and HP sound like they are.
Well,
No,
yeah.
obviously
No.
not.
Well,
They're
and
not.
maybe those corps
They're
aren't.
not software developed. Software.
Of course,
Probably
right.
how to put it.
Yeah, and they want to keep their infrastructure as stable as possible. You know, if you think about maybe this is not an appropriate correlation to make, but a long time ago, maybe people had one big terminal system with one big, you know, Unix mainframe. And that was cool for like 15, 20 years. So what's wrong with a 10-year-old browser, right? I mean, why should we upgrade that?
Well, those people now are your C-level. People are making those decisions.
Sure, and we don't get to make those decisions for them. You know, when it comes down to it, they have the leverage, and if they're using it, we can't tell them, well, we understand it might have a negative impact on your infrastructure team, but do it anyway. It's going to make our lives a lot easier. You know, that we won't have to support your old browser. But it's just it's a pain point that we have to live with, unfortunately. Hopefully, as time goes by, we'll get better, but we're getting better at supporting it. You know, the culture was not super big on it, you know, back when I first came around. In fact, the culture not super big on Microsoft in general. Kind of everybody's running, you know, Linux boxes, and surprising how little testing must have actually been going on in these tier 1 browsers before I came around. I've covered this stuff. So, my approach, speaking of biases, I'm going to jump ahead. When I say that they didn't have, you know, Windows boxes, I get a new piece of functionality and I go look at it. It's wrong. I mean, it's like the instant you bring it up, oh, that doesn't look right at all. This is immediately apparent. And what it told me my first week there was nobody who developed on this ever loaded it one time in Internet Explorer at all. You know, and just by chatting and getting to know people and being, you know, sociable, as sociable as you can, being that guy who is nebulously existing in Seattle and bothering you on instant messenger all day. You get to hear some rants, you know, people start, you know, I might be found a bug about spaces and file names, and somebody was like, Microsoft should have never allowed spaces and file names, you know, and then the rant goes off, and, you know, and it's just, the instant messenger starts flying, and that I see as data to guide my testing. And, well, maybe these guys aren't that big on the Microsoft stack. Maybe they're not super motivated to go and load IE and test the product in there. And it helped me find lots of bugs in the new functionality that is the big deal. Using IM heavily and collaborating. My point of view as far as how can I be effective without filing piles of bugs. Is by kind of trying to take this whole team approach and collaborating with our product team and our devs and our customer service team, who are all awesome. They're super receptive. They seem really interested in having somebody from engineering who cares about what the product team is doing. And it helps me to identify when I'm totally off base or when something is a bigger deal than I think it is. Because again, I don't know the product well enough, I know the space well enough, and I don't know the users well enough to actually say, this is wrong, or this should be different. You know, being able to talk to the product owner and say, I saw this thing, what do you think about it, without trying too heavily to influence them. I don't want to ping the product owner and say, well, this looks like garbage, and find out it was their favorite thing they spent a week on, you know, and it was awesome. Fortunately, that hasn't happened. I just say, I kind of think this maybe, what do you think of how this looks? And surprisingly, you know, the product owner will say, I hate it, it looks terrible, you know, and that happened one time. I looked at this beautiful wireframe that our product owner had put together. It was great. I've never seen anything like it before in all my years of testing. She'd taken all this nice time to make beautiful mock-ups that looked really great and were intuitive. I just thought, wow, this thing practically tests itself. I can just kind of compare these two. And I looked at what it actually looked like, and it was totally different. I thought, well, how did this happen? Like, this looks great, and this, not so much. And,
IE6, baby.
It wasn't even IE6 this time, you know, and it was kind of a design thing. And so I pinged the product owner. I said, what do you think of these big red X's? You know, what had been cute little, like, you ever seen Netflix Instant? They've got the little blue X for deleting things off the queue list. And that's kind of what the wireframe looked like. And the actual thing had great big red stop signs, like on each thing, with a big white X in the middle. And the column was called action. The only thing you could do in that column was delete, but the column was called action. And I didn't even notice that. That didn't jump out at me, just these big red X's did. And I didn't want to ping the product owner and say, what do you think of those awful big red X's? I just said, what do you think of the red X's? And she said, I hate them. They look terrible. And I said, well, how do you feel about how they compare to your wireframe? She said, I don't think they look anything like my wireframe. And I said, well, okay, but you know, in the bug, I'm kind of dancing around the fact that in the user story she wrote looks great. Go ahead, you know. And I talked to her about, well, how did the users? We do user testing using the go-to meeting. We'll have users volunteer to play with the product and give us their feedback. And I said, what do the users think of the big red X? And that's when I found out about the action column. She said, well, for one thing, they're totally confused about the action column. They want to know what else they can do. It looks like they should click there and something else happens. They expect more because it's called action. And they all pretty universally hate the big red stop signs. And I said, so why are we putting out big red stop signs then? And why isn't that a delete column? And she said, well, you know, I talked to the designer and he said it's better design and he's the designer, so you know, and you know, she's awesome and the designer's awesome too. This is just a case of, you know, expert dealing with another expert where their areas of expertise aren't applicable. And it worked out great. She said, yeah, you're right, you know, the customers are what matters. Well, let's get rid of those, just go ahead and file a bug on that and say we got to redesign it, let's have it look like the wireframe, and let's get rid of that action column and call it delete, and it'll be much better. It was super easy. Nobody's feelings were hurt. It was fine, you know, and I think it made it a lot better going on. It's a small change, but things like that, through not kind of having a full whole team communicative, collaborative approach, can happen where you got one person talking to another person, and then this ends up creating a thing that may not be ideal. So identifying biases, the asking questions. I ask a lot of questions when I stumble on things. John would say what I'm doing is not ignoring bugs, but practicing risk-based testing, where I kind of decide on the fly if this is risky enough to the user that it should be filed. I mean, if I see something that's really catastrophic, I'm not supposed to ignore that, you know, but if I'm kind of wading through lots of smaller things that don't stop the user from doing what they're doing, then it's better to ignore them.
Are you writing these things down even though you're not filing them? Because the fear I can see is when they come back to you and go, how come you didn't catch this?
Yeah, and what's interesting, I mean, on the one hand, it's a very small organization. So the structure is I report to the chief technology officer. He's the guy who said don't go filing bugs, you know. So there's not a lot of abstraction there. There's not a lot of people to step in and go, hey, why didn't you file this bug? He's the guy. If he were to say, hey, why didn't you file this bug? He'd go, because you told me not to file bugs. And it would be a silly conversation. That probably wouldn't happen. But you're right, there's a risk. A lot of what I'll do, if I see something that's borderline, I can't get a hold of the product owner, I'll just take a screenshot or do a screencast of it, and then I have this kind of folder, you know, and you could say I'm filing it in that way, but it's just with me. And my thought on that is I'm kind of building a regression pile, you know, of things. Once a given area of functionality has been replaced, I have this kind of pool of things to see if they've recurred in some way or if they're still valid. But they're not going into the bug database. The worry, I think, with the filing of bugs is we have, I don't know, 1 or 2 project managers who handle all the triage. If I file 150 bugs in a week, regardless of whether or not they get postponed or get attacked, that project manager has to deal with every single one. She's got to sit there and go through and triage them and figure out, you know, which ones are really worth doing. And I think that the decision was made to take some load off of a newly overloaded project manager with a new approach, because they're all used to the waterfall and we're doing the Scrum business. My talking to Todd, his approach to methodology change is to introduce the minimum amount of process necessary and to iterate on it. You know, we run through our 3-week sprint, and then we have a really great retrospectives where people talk openly and tell us what works, what didn't work, and I've often worried about retrospectives as a mechanism in that people will go, well, you know, is this just a platform for everybody to say, why didn't the tester find everything, or why did Dev put this crap in there to begin with? You know, that's a risk of having retrospectives, but this team is great. If anything, the retrospectives are a little light. You know, everything was really great, and I'm going, maybe they're not so that great. You know, but they all expect me to be the poison pill in the retrospective anyway. It's sort of my role.
Go ahead.
I have a quick question for you. You said that there weren't any QA people there at the company
No,
before.
yeah.
Did they have a bug tracking database for like customer service or anything?
I don't think so. I don't know what they did to handle it because there's all this new infrastructure there now. They occasionally would bring in like an outsourced team. You know, they bring some like a QA contracting team to come in and look at things from time to time, and that team would report to them issues. I don't know what they used for bug tracking before I got there, and I know what they're using now is not it because it's all super scrummy Kanban, stuff.
The only reason why I ask is because I had a similar experience at my last job before they had layoffs, but they didn't have much of a QA department before, and I came on board as the manager, and what we did was I met with the customer service manager there, or maybe product owner in your case, or whoever, and you fleshed out all the critical issues that they were noticing and make sure that those are captured because you already know their issues, you can get your steps to reproduce. And then going forward, you just, so you don't have to, when I look at your first bulleted item about using IM, I just think, gosh, then you're just going back and forth, or asking this other guy, is Daryl at his desk, even though I know Daryl's a great guy. Yeah. But I guess my thought is, if you already kind of know, based on severity and priority, if that even hits the bug bar, in your opinion, you could file that away, write it up later, and then just focus on the critical issues without having to maybe ask people, and that might save you a little time as well as saving them time.
And that's great advice, and it's a great idea. And to be fair, I mean, I collaborate heavily, probably more about the new stuff than I do about anything I find in the old site. If anything, I have complete intentional blindness as far as the public site and the legacy stuff goes. I kind of go out of my way to stay away from it because I know that I'm going to get just totally quagmired in it, but as far as, I mean, it would be great for an experienced tester who's really familiar with the product to be able to do that. I wouldn't be comfortable with that. I've been there for a couple months now, but it's all still very new to me. And coming in especially totally cold, I would be nowhere near the ability to kind of judge where that bar is. And I'm surprised at how often I'm off base on it. When I talk to a product owner, there's been several times where I thought, well, this is a bug. I didn't talk to the product owner and say, hey, look, I found this thing, and the product owner is it's not a big deal, and other things where I go, I found this little winky thing that's not a huge deal. Oh, you got to file that. That's massively, that's terrible. Our customers are totally going to see that. This is great catch, And so, surprisingly often, I find myself, they go, hey, great catch. And I'm like, well, not really. I mean, it's not that big a deal. Or I go, well, I found this great bug, and I'm, it's not so much. So my barometer is evidently not up to snuff to use that approach. But I totally agree that's an awesome way to go at it if you have an experienced team that understands the product. And in this case, it's kind of hard to have one because it's changing, right now.
And why didn't they ever have a QA person? I'm sorry, why didn't they have another, because they didn't have another QA person before in the 10, 11 years, and now you're on board, first of all, sucker, but good luck to you. And then, but I'm just curious, and then what did you come up with?
They probably had a great QA team. It's called the customers.
Yeah, I mean,
they had it for 11 years in place, and they didn't have a QA person.
Well, and I think that maybe because it's maybe sometimes QA. I mean, often is viewed as a cost basis, and a big deal about I think VolunteerMatch is how successful they've been over those years. I imagine it's harder to sell added cost basis when your chart's going up and to the right so well, and you're going, well, we need to bring in a tester, we need to pay somebody to do this. I mean, I don't agree with it. I just, I'm not saying we should all lose our jobs, because if your chart's going up and to the right, you don't need testing. But I think that must be, when you start really small. I mean, they started their pioneering website. Nobody was doing anything like that in 1998, and I'm sure when you get first started, you got a couple devs, and you're just cranking it out, and it goes out when you're done. Or Joe comes in at midnight and he makes a change and pushes it out, and if something goes wrong, we'll just pull it back and fix it. What do they want for nothing? Maybe that's the point of view.
Nice.
Go ahead.
I wanted to share with her that
No worries.
I also have had a chance to speak with a 10-year-old company that is just now adding a tester, and their reason they finally added a tester is they had a client who demanded it and offered to pay for it.
Nice.
So they did not want testing, except for their client did. And sometimes that's the only thing that will get a business to try it.
Right.
Or another place that I've seen it come in is where new management structure comes on board and they're used to having testing.
And that's exactly what's going on at VolunteerMatch. Todd is awesome, he's really into testing. I remember, I met Todd before he offered me the job at VolunteerMatch, and I kind of always I worked at WebTrends for almost 10 years, and it's a pretty big kind of organization where I don't know who the CTO at Web Transit is. I never did the whole time I worked there. I just assume he's a guy with a really nice suit who comes in and sits in an office somewhere and makes high-end decisions, and none of us may speak to him. So when I met Todd and heard, he's a chief technology kind of guy, I thought, well, he's not going to have anything to do with testers, and then I realized he had a pretty interesting technical blog going on. I was like, well, hey, this guy keeps a technical blog and does geeky stuff. And the latest blog post I saw was him writing about how the company he was with at the time, their test team was totally overloaded, so he went ahead and put together a Selenium framework for them. And I thought, that's the thing I didn't think that CTOs did. But it impressed me about Todd, and he's very testing oriented and into test-driven development and into agile testing and all that stuff. So one of the first things he did when he took over VolunteerMatch was we needed a tester, full time. This is important, and he got the budget for it. Luckily for me, he called me and said, "Hey, do you want to do that?" And I did. I'm a sucker, but it's a crazy awesome team. It's ridiculous. I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Somebody's going to say, "This doesn't exist." You wake up. Work with it. So come on.
I was going to share an experience that I had a similar situation where, when people want quality, they're going after it. They're trying to put processes in place, but what they didn't have, and what I'm not sure your organization has, is a service level agreement. Something where, as an organization, either from your mission or the integrity you have, you've defined, this is our service level of this product or this service to our constituents. It could be 30 days turnaround, it could be 8 hours.
Sure.
But if an organization understands that, then that becomes your universal baseline for testing, for severity, and I'm not sure if you have anything implemented like that, but that would be a game changer that you could maybe introduce when you're ready to.
That's
that
great.
Might help.
Yeah, and I would love to hear ideas as well. I mean, like I said, this job is totally like crazy awesome in that way, and that when I say, hey, I had this great idea, we do it, and if it doesn't work, we'll stop doing it. But at WebTrends, we definitely live by the SLA with especially with our SaaS product. It's huge, and we have huge multi-terabyte a month warehouse customers, and if we sit there and have, it's not possible to charge people that kind of money and handle that kind of data without having a really rigid SLA. I wouldn't say that, in this case, I wouldn't say that led to very good quality practices. I'd like to think that in that case it would be, but that was not the picture of quality, despite the fact that we had it. But I totally agree with you, it's a great idea because done correctly. You can have an SLA and ignore it and just go, okay, well, we'll just put the fire out when it happens. That's the other side of the SLA is, on the one hand, you'd like to think that means you'd go, oh, well, we have this SLA and we put ourselves at considerable risk by failing to meet it, so we're going to put in quality practices and make sure we're getting ahead of it. Or you can say, well, we have to have this SLA in order to get the business, and let's just push it out, and if it explodes, we'll roll it back in time, or we'll just put a SWAT team on it and patch that real quick. But I'm definitely going to consider bringing that up bring it up and talk to the team about how can we leverage this to bring quality. I appreciate that. Oh, go ahead.
So I'm a QA director for ATT.com, Circulate the Web Experience. I am looking for work, so. But one thing that we did is we were, when I first started with this group about 6 years ago, it was very similar to what you're going through. In fact, we were joking earlier that we got our requirements on a napkin because the guys went out to the bar and wrote them down, and so we wanted to look like this kind of thing.
Right.
So what we did is we have our business customer involved in the triages. They set the priorities of the ticket.
Nice.
That gets everybody on the same page and it makes a more collaborative effort. It actually speeds things up.
That sounds great. Yeah.
So if you're not writing bugs down, you can actually have a conversation about, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Is this what you wanted?
Right.
Kind of thing. Or let's walk through the site. Let's do a walkthrough and see if you're getting what you want. If you have the developers on there as well, then they're going to go, oh, that's what they meant in the requirement. I mean, that happens a lot. There's a lot of light bulbs.
Exactly.
So if you drive that collaborative, you get everybody engaged and feel that they own it, you can get things out a lot faster. And quality is driven by everybody. It's not just QA's responsibility to identify the quality.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to bring in, and like I said before, I don't know what level of communication it was between product and dev. My guess is not a ton,
Drive the PM.
Yeah, well, and actually
get the PM to engage the business.
Our product owner is awesome, and she's really excited to have this engagement from engineering. I don't think she's used to it. She hands down requirements, and the engineers make it, and she says, okay, good, and it goes up. Now I'm there saying, well, is this really good? Like, how do you feel about that? You know, and she feels, she's been super positive, and every time when I bug her about the red stop sign, she's like, well, that's awesome. I hated them, and we shouldn't do it that way, you know, and that she needed that extra impetus to move it along. And what I'm trying to do is kind of bring this whole team approach to the next sort of stage of having sort of an ATDD process where we've got at every story we take a little time with the dev and the product and me to sit there and get concrete examples and write them down and say, we mean this and not this, you know.
Right.
And it's something that's in the works, but you know, like I said before about at the minimum process necessary.
Well, that's where we started with the walkthrough, because we were like, everybody was saying no process. I think we were, from concept out the door, it was in 2 weeks.
Right, yeah.
So that's what we were at. Now we're at 90 days. So
okay, it's a different process. Different.
Well, it's a much bigger site now than it was when it was ATT Wireless.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
We've got a lot more products, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's a lot of fun. And you mentioned ownership. I think that's a big deal about the whole team approach in general. Having worked in at another large web analytics company, very siloed. I couldn't tell you who product owner was today, and I worked there for almost a decade.
Right.
And all we knew was the product team was sort of this nebulous cloud that threw PRDs over the wall and made our lives miserable because they'd throw them in at the last minute and we didn't even have time to test it already, and how are we going to let this thing go?
Right.
And then you've got the adversarial kind of dev versus QA point of views. I think these things it's my personal opinion that these things are born of and grow from siloing, and that you get ownership by getting everybody together and realizing that you all want the same exact thing. That product wants to put out a great product, and that dev wants to make a great product, and so does QA, and that we're all in it to test it and make it great.
Right.
You know, and
that's been very successful where we're at, trying to get folks together.
Well, that's great to
when
know.
that communication starts to break down, that's when projects fall apart.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I'm really grateful to this team for being so communicative and totally. I mean, it's every time it's positive. I'm waiting for the the pushback, and I keep dipping my toe and going, sure, this is cool. Like, yeah, that's great. We love it. You know, it's really terrific.
I was just going to say two things that maybe, I don't know if you have the availability or bandwidth for it, but I know sometimes when you have a really huge ratio of dev to QA, that sometimes if you have like another test environment and your boss is willing to have like half the team work on this current sprint and half work on the other one, so if you have a different test environment, then they're always checking into that branch all the time, so that might be one way. And then number two, if it's possible for you and the business owner to sit down and work on a developer's box ahead of time, like pair programming, where they're working on that ahead of time, both them and the other person, so then you flush out a lot of that ahead of time. That's very quickly, you're not spending your time writing all the bugs, and you're working real time, and they can deliver that, so then when you have a couple days later, you can go back and on site.
No,
so I don't know.
No, that's terrific, and we do have multiple test environments.
One tester.
Yeah, one tester.
Right.
One
well,
tester.
Basically, we've got a dev environment and a test environment. Well, I guess two test environments. We've got a hotfix environment and an XREL environment. So we've got the next release and a hotfix. They're not ideal. When I worked at, one of the things I did at WebTrends was build a staging environment for the SaaS product, which was huge. You know, a friend of mine sort of spearheaded it. We started sticking servers together because there was no budget, you know, because it would be way too expensive to have a test environment. I thought, well, we're going to be dealing with massive amounts of data. Maybe we should test massive amounts of data at some point. And we did it anyway, just kind of took our own hardware, and it became so indispensable that suddenly we had budget for it. It was a huge deal. And I'm trying to, one of our projects is doing that at VolunteerMatch. Right now, it's all kind of a couple of bare metal servers at a co-located place. We're migrating the whole site over to EC2 because Todd's kind of lead like that. And we're going to move the test environments eventually to the Amazon Elastic Cloud, which will be great because there's so many minor issues with consistency that create problems that aren't really bugs, that are just, well, we don't have that, you know, or that database isn't updated, or I say, well, when are we going to get this updated to what's on production? It takes somebody like 6 hours to do that, so it's hard to sell that on, let's do that regularly. But if we can get it to where the main site's on EC2 and it's clonable, then, you know, it should be a quick little bang, we got another test environment up, and also drive a consistency initiative. You can't have patches and duct tape and bubble gum on it if it's got to be clonable and work on any, you know, virtual instance. So we're there with the concept. but not there yet with the actual implementation. It's on the big list, but it's definitely hugely useful feedback. Did I miss anybody else? All right. So where did I leave off? Yeah, my slides. I'm really enjoying the discussion. Anybody feel free to chime in. I don't have that many slides, so.
Did you go down there in person and meet the team, and do you go there somewhat regularly?
I want to, but I just had a baby in January 28th, which was, he was 3 weeks early, but kind enough to show up 4 days after my first full-time day at volunteer. So I had some benefits to that. But it has had a slight impact on my productivity the last couple of weeks. It's hard to fly to San Francisco for a week when there's a 3 or 4 or 5 week old baby at home, and mom is still learning how to cope. But I think I'll be going down in the next month. They're going to have me down a week or two a year just to work with the team. I've been surprised at how well everybody's getting along despite the remoteness and all the instant messenger. Everybody seems really excited to meet and see me as a person instead of a pop-up.
But you have to put on good pants and shoes too.
Oh, I know, I have to wear clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to dress up for this thing. I thought maybe I'd show up in a bathrobe, to kind of push the fact that I'm a telecommuting guy, But I like to have to dress up every now and again. Have you ever seen the Oatmeal did a very funny comic about the dangers of telecommuting? There's a reason I pay for a co-working space in Ballard and go into an office and sit at a chair and desk with a computer. And it's not just that there's a screaming poop monster in my house.
Where is it located? Can you talk about that?
The office or where I co-work?
The co-work.
Co-working spaces. It's called Indie Ballard. It's in Ballard on just on 20th off of Market. It's not like Office Nomads or any of the big guys in town. It's just kind of being run by a guy whose startup was failing and he wanted to keep his space. So he's just kind of renting out a few desks and he's kind of happy to do it. But that's cool for me. This is cheap.
3 blocks from my house.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I'm on 51st and 11th, so I can walk to work. So it's like 3/4 of a mile walk from where I live. It's pretty awesome.
How's that space working out for you?
Great, love it. It's terrific. It's not a collaborative co-working space like a lot of other ones, but it's good. We can talk about it afterward if you're interested in more details. Not that I want to discourage anybody from asking questions in any way. Always checking the live site when I encounter a bug. I kind of already covered that. If it's already there, I think kind of part of the mindset is, and it's not a good one per se, but the users are accepting the level that we have given them for this much time. If we had approached things from they found something they really don't like, we'll make that a priority and fix it while we focus on this refactor, which is huge. I mean, we're completely new framework on the back end, totally new redesign, the UX team being brought in to totally change how the site looks and feels, and really elite testing team to make sure that everything is very well tested. Yeah, this guy. If it's kind of an existent bug, if it has, my concern is things being introduced by new functionality, and that happens sometimes where I could never have predicted it. Something totally touching somewhere else. In fact, we shipped a not great bug just this last release, and it was a kind of an obvious one that appeared quickly during regression testing, but I never would have checked that part of the site for the changes that we had made with this release, and yet it was totally affected, and it's very hard to handle that. And hopefully, with time, I'll get better at putting in some more automated checks and having some of those things handled. We run into some things where automation I think would be really good for, like changing all the character sets on a majority of the site. I'm not going to want to go through and look with my eyeballs at 150 pages to see if the character set is UTF-8. That's not a good use of testing effort. That to me is something that would be really well automated. And maybe unit testing, it should be part of, I think, the development process. I mean, not that it shouldn't be tested, but I think it should be tested by dev. You go in and do that. Do your test when you're doing it before you do it.
Have you tried assembly testing?
No.
Okay. We have our devs do assembly testing, which is basically, once they put it in our test environment, we give them a set of test cases that they have to execute and they have to pass before we'll accept the code.
Nice. Oh yeah, that's kind of like ATDD.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically that's what I envision ultimately.
It's similar to that, yeah.
Yeah.
You also make the tester sit down
Yeah.
So that there's an understanding that even though they have the test cases, the tester will sit down and say, no, that's not what you, no, that's not it.
Yes,
This
yes,
is
you
what-
wrote something that will pass every time, that's
Yeah.
not
So
exactly.
Exactly.
where is this,
Whereas what?
the assembly coding happening?
After code complete before it goes in the.
No, I mean, what size of a company?
att.com.
So big one.
So, I don't see that really working at companies of,
Smaller
30
structure.
people or less
Well,
often.
It could. I
Yeah,
mean, you're-
absolutely.
Scale.
that's part of the
Yeah.
ownership
Yeah.
thing, that when you're trying to drive ownership, it's not, I'm just suggesting, it might not be, it's a good way to get the devs involved, to understand once the code moves from their dev box into the test environment, to make sure that their code, the merge happened the correct way.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there's there could and there is it does. When you're talking about a company that hasn't had any testing for 10 years,
Yeah, you're
it
right,
could,
there's risk.
it's probably gonna take some time.
Yeah, and of course, also the velocity with which we release, to testing environments, which is why I think having that ATDD process where we hash it out and have it done ahead of time at the requirement stage is where it would work. I think once you're at that, I mean, in a way, code complete happens every day, multiple times. The guy makes his change and then pushes it to the staging development environment, and then it hopefully tests it and then sends it to the next rel environment. But if it was actually part of the process where before that even happened, we had sort of an automated acceptance test suite that said, these issues are going to remain green, or you will go back and look at what you did immediately.
Right.
But I really can't speak authoritatively on it. I haven't done it. I'm familiar with the theory behind it. I've had a really wonderful class from Elizabeth Hendrickson, which I highly recommend. I think she's doing one in San Francisco if anybody wants to fly down there.
Yeah, but in response to it being a smaller group, it doesn't matter, our life cycles are very similar.
Right.
No matter how many people you're talking about, it's the same life cycle.
It could be for one feature.
Right.
Yeah.
Not an entire website, but a feature that crosses many pages.
When it could scale,
Right.
because you might have 150 developers, but 75 testers.
Well, we found having our dev group do AT saved us weeks of testing,
Nice.
so.
Didn't they resist that?
Oh, yeah.
And how did you get them how did you win?
Well, yeah, the first argument you're presented with
Don't
is,
accept it.
I'm doing your job,
Yeah.
I'm testing. And we're like, well, no, you're actually doing the merge, right? You're responsible for the merge. And they're like, well, yeah. Okay, once you merge it in there, why don't you make sure everything got there? We're only gonna give you a small sampling of test cases. We'll sit with you, walk through it with you, and then we can make sure if we don't do this, we're gonna write defects on stuff that you're like, but I merged that. So let's save everybody time. And once that argument worked, I mean, it actually settled in, and then they found it worked. We have shaved weeks off of test time.
They beg for the cases.
Yeah, they can't wait to get the test cases now in advance, because they want them before they're done developing, so that they can make sure what we're gonna ask them to look at.
And it prevents them from throwing stuff under the wall and just helping QA to find all the bugs.
And how do you know enough to write the test cases? Are you provided, you all have the same spec? Is
Yes.
that the case? Okay, so that there's.
That's,
So
yeah.
we've got
And your
requirements.
your
And
ATE
you
is
guys
based
have
on.
specs right now?
We have wireframes. We have remarkably good specs. I mean, it's not 3-inch
So you're
thick.
further ahead than some small places that don't have any testing. I mean.
Oh yeah, I mean the team is remarkably great. Considering the background. Especially that you could see there'd be a lot of resistance and a lot of pushback. But you very rarely hear, "Well, I'm not going to do your job for you," or "That's not my job." It's amazing how positive their culture is to this kind of change.
And I see their point too. If you had one developer who was the right developer, who was enthusiastic about doing it, I mean, a team of one developer and one tester could theoretically make it work.
Oh yeah.
So in me saying it doesn't work, I just mean I haven't seen it in practice yet,
Of course.
because of these obstacles you're talking about with biases
Siloing.
and siloing,
Yeah,
and
well, and
some of
that-
the process is not there.
Yeah.
Not that it's not possible.
And it's not my job, I think,
Yeah.
is a direct, that's my biggest problem with siloing as a culture, is it results in, I think, lots of, that's not my job. Why should I test that? I'm a programmer, me programmer, you tester. And that's not, I don't think healthy for anybody.
Get back in there.
Yeah, go
And
test.
another quick answer to you too is what we did when we first, before
I ran out of time.
the next release, we started showing them the first day of bugs. We showed them, these are merge issues. So we wrote 50 defects and you guys look bad because you didn't do this. So the next time when they did assembly testing, we wrote maybe 1 defect.
Your terminology's odd to me because I thought assembly was like machine.
I kind of thought she meant machine language too, but she
That's
thinks
isn't
assembly
that
does.
whole
It's
punishment
more of an
of
acceptance
developers?
test that we
Sorry.
accept.
You can
So,
call them
John-
as a BVT, build
Oh,
verification
okay,
test.
wait.
Yeah.
Build verification test.
It's assembly because we have a lot of integrated pieces.
think he
that
wants
go
to
And
go
what
back
does
to
merge
decision
mean?
making.
Does that mean integration?
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just a weird
Merge off the
vocabulary
tree.
to me. Like
Merging
merging branches,
branches.
but not integration.
But I'm gonna just ask him
Yeah.
how
Merging
does
is
he
a
mean?
code.
It's an e-commerce site. You're merging,
Is the chat not working?
you're merging a lot of projects
You can't get
together.
in, he's behind a firewall.
Oh,
To a bunch of APIs, to a bunch of functionality on the back end systems. So you have to do, it's called assembly testing because you're assembling all the code together.
So we call that integration testing.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, every company has different terms.
Totally.
I mean, really, so.
Yeah, but with the context of
Yeah, Linda, at the build, as they're building it up the TFS, that's what they call it?
Merge.
No, integration?
I've worked at like 4 places I've never heard of. That's odd to me.
So-
It's like I need a glossary.
I would throw out when you join any new team that hasn't had a tester or a decent development process, it's easy to get stuck on vocabulary.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like we're doing
exactly
here.
right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's not assembly testing. That's integration testing. Well, but who cares, right?
Yeah.
My tribe calls it the BBT.
Yeah, call
Yeah.
it whatever you want. You know, it's when this dude does these things and affects us in that way, right? I mean, arguably, that's something I think John recommends a lot of the time because people, especially in a new sort of testing community, there's all this jargon and terminology.
Yes.
You know,
Doesn't matter.
my default is no. You know, and John doesn't say. You know, and whenever somebody says, you know, well, are you familiar with, you know, the Blargen-Flugen testing process? I go, no. And you shouldn't do that. You should say, maybe, tell me what it is, and then you maybe are. I just go, no, you know, hopefully they'll tell me what it is anyway, and I'll go, oh yeah, I do that all the time. You know, of course, the problem you run into when you're dealing with mavens then is those people will say, oh, you know, like that thing you do all the time, and then describe it to you, and then you'll run around and say, I do this all the time, and they'll go, no, that's not the right way, you're wrong. You do it wrong all the time, and they go, but you said it's that thing. So all right. All right, so where were we? Good biases, identifying product owners and bridging the culture gap between product and engineering. We talked about that already. They've been really awesome with that, checking the live site, basically regression testing the live site to make sure that I haven't introduced anything. Rewards of not testing. We all know what the risks are. The significantly reduced overhead. I initially had this saying the V time, you know, all the bug time spent tracking it down, filing it, etc. But John pointed out that it really eliminates all 3. But I think the bigger of the 3 that it eliminates is all that B time, because it's easy to not have T time if you're ignoring bugs, because you're not actually testing as much. And we have very little less time. We have standing staging. Everybody's familiar with TBS metrics?
Assembly testing, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever you want to call it, yeah. Yeah, no, you should say no. I don't know anybody. We're all kind of leveraged to deliver the refactored product. That's our big push is we're going to make the new thing better, and we're going to make sure that it's really great. We're not going to let things slide, and you know we're going to be thorough and make sure that when we push something out, it's really as good as it can be for the user. And hopefully, as new features begin to replace old ones, those unfiled bugs will become moot. It's going to be really important to check those out after the fact. You know, when we replace a given piece of functionality, I'm going to have that directory full of, you know, orphan screencasts or screenshots, and I can go through. It'll probably be very entertaining. I'll go, hey, look at that! Remember that? It looked terrible. It's much better now. So, you know, I guess I just blew right through this slide. Anybody have any questions about this stuff? I've kind of been yammering about all this stuff together. I haven't exactly been linear in my discussion. Issues I've run into. What was that? Oh, that thing I was talking about earlier where something I totally didn't plan on was broken by something that should not have touched it. That's the the bug that escaped, and I'm sure bugs escape. One guy, you know, there's no way I'm gonna catch everything. And fortunately, the team is very forgiving. Maybe it's because they're used to big bugs escaping all the time. You know, my first release, like I said, I'd look in IE and it was really bad. You know, wow, this was immediately, obviously, bad. And my first, after my first release of Todd, they'd done a few iterations before I came because I was otherwise engaged. And he said, "This was great. This is the first release where we pushed out and like 5 people didn't come to my desk." They shipped them and say, "Hey, wait, this is terrible. We gotta fix this thing." He said that we released it. Nobody came to talk to me. So mission accomplished. Great job. You know, and of course I'm devoured with guilt, and I'm sure I missed a million things and totally paranoid that something awful made it past me. So being new to the product, practicing risk-based testing is a challenge. Lean heavily on our customer and product teams to mitigate these risks. I guess that's kind of repeating something I've already talked about quite a bit. It's the previous project that I worked in, no feedback, no information. I mean, the customer intentionally wanted me not to have any information because they didn't want to influence my testing, but it was kind of difficult to test in that environment. It sometimes took days to get an email response from that customer, and the email response would be jargon laden. You know, it would literally be, you know, well, in the case where you do the head query type thing, that's not something we care about. Don't test there. And I would say, what's a head query type thing? And they would go, well, we probably shouldn't have said that term to you because we don't want to expose you to what it means. And then, but how then do I know not to file bugs? How do I know I'm doing the thing you don't care about if you don't define the thing you don't care about? And so that was difficult and led to sort of the opposite environment where there was no feedback, but I was working like crazy to produce as many bugs as possible, find as many bugs as I can, and make sure that if you won't tell me what constitutes a bug, I'm going to give you everything I see. You know, here's the whole shebang, and hopefully you will complain about it in such a way I'll be able to investigate what actually matters to you and hone my process around it. And my big discussion question for people to argue about. As a professional tester, are you morally obligated to report every bug you find?
No.
No.
But you can document it somewhere else.
Anybody else disagree with that?
What about the ones you don't find?
Well, I guess that's a good point. You are definitely not morally obligated to report the bugs you don't find.
I think that you are morally obligated to be transparent about what you're not reporting.
So how's that not reporting? Explain in what way your transparency is not reporting.
You're not reporting explicitly, but you're saying it is not included. For example, I had a test plan that said, I am not including any bugs that are found outside of these product areas. It's found in the third-party system. It's beyond their control and will not be reported.
Yeah, so you're defining your scope.
It's a scope, right?
But you're not actually you're not reporting those bugs at all then, right? Because you're ignoring everything in the third party.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's not really the
But she might find one, she just said she won't report it.
I won't report it. I just said it's outside of the scope of what we care about. We can't
It's a weird question.
care about and report everything.
You can't answer that.
No, you can't.
No.
Wouldn't be a very good discussion starter if you could answer the question.
No.
Exactly.
No. Okay, everybody, yes. All right, we're done. Have a good night. Glad you came up with my big puzzler.
No, let's back at you. Do you think there's any moral absolute?
No, I mean, my personal belief is that as professional testers who get paid to do this, we're sort of moral relativists. I mean, we can go ahead and beat our drum and say, no, I will not let that go by me in my watch, and they can go and pay somebody else to go ahead and let it go by them in their watch. I mean, we get paid to, in my opinion, we serve a stakeholder, we serve a client and a customer, and if we don't pay attention to the fact that there's cost and that there's variables outside of, altruistic quality perfection, then we don't have customers or stakeholders or clients because there's no business, nobody's paying for anything because it's just too not perfect enough to go out.
I think you're morally obligated to be a customer advocate, and if you willingly let bugs that impact customers negatively past you and you don't defend them, I don't respect you very much as a tester.
Define willingly. I mean, how much is enough spike?
Right.
Knowingly.
I would like you not to ship that. Or you will absolutely not ship that on my watch.
Well, you only have so much power, but you can, if you make the impacts known, you make your opinion known, and you logically do your best, then
You have
that's
to
one
pick your
thing.
battles.
Yeah,
You have to pick your
I
battles.
agree.
Not every bug is worth
I
it.
would agree that not every bug is worth it, but at least you should make the user impact known.
Well, it's a classic fault failure model. You're gonna, from right off the bat, you're going to, put in as many faults as, or failures as I come across that might lead to a fault, but I'm already gonna discern, like, no, I don't wanna do those, or I don't think those are gonna be vetted at the right, we run across a lot more than we're probably, willing to put up there saying, would you please triage this and see if it's truly a failure?
Right.
That's just the way it works.
What does John Bach think?
Well, he's there in texting.
WWJD.
We're risk-based right off the.
We're slipping from reporting the bugs to becoming the gatekeeper and
Right,
has not become the gatekeeper.
No, absolutely.
Well, and also who's the customer? Because like, for instance, if you have a medical data entry program, the customer might be the person whose data you're airing, the person sitting at the screen typing, or the stockholder, the company. And those are three very different customers with three very different requirement sets.
Right. Well, that's my last slide. If anyone wants to keep talking about, moral relativism or,
Yeah, but it doesn't matter who the customer is if you have information about a defect that can harm them and you don't make it known. Then you are slightly despicable in my book. That's my own personal book. It doesn't apply elsewhere, but I consider you on a slippery slope of despicableness.
I hope somebody tweeted that. That's why we're going to turn this
So are you basically calling Adam? Are you calling Adam that because he's working at a company that has hundreds, if not thousands, of bugs, and he's making notes of them now? He's not writing them up because he just doesn't have the bandwidth, and he's picking.
Wow, that would take quite a series of assumptions.
Well,
I'm asking. You were very extreme in your answer, so I'm just curious.
No, definitely not. So first of all, these are things that the defects are already known, and they're making improvements in a different way.
They may not already be known though. Maybe
Oh,
they
no,
haven't even
they're not
documented
known.
them.
They
They
can't be
haven't
known.
documented them, so how would they all be known? They're not known.
That's true. They are unknown.
Yes, but he's not looking for them.
That's true.
That is not the priority, and if he does run across them and they are harmful,
Then I'll bring them
he
up.
is bringing them up.
But that wasn't the question.
That was not the
I know.
question.
Am I morally
To
obligated?
every bug.
Yeah.
No, nobody could possibly.
And now you're saying, can you show us that slide again?
All right. This thing only has one interface here.
Yes.
So we're gonna stay with
See, now it's all didn't
Okay.
work. That's what I did.
Oh, there.
I can't even talk.
That's crappy. Write that up! It's my moral obligation.
I know, right?
It's not working.
Oh, there was no previous.
Is this saying
There's two.
Very
There you
good.
go.
Okay, so now read that statement again. I'm
Every
curious what your
Are you
thoughts are.
morally obligated to report every bug you find?
Yes, it means that you found them.
It means you.
That's
found it.
fair. She has legal view.
I did not
It does say you
say
find. It doesn't say in existence.
every bug in existence that you may or may not know about. Are you morally obligated to look for every single bug where you suspect it may be regardless of value to anyone? No, it doesn't say that. It says every bug you find
Bare knuckle
and are
boxing
aware
time.
of.
Okay, you've got an application that when you time out after an hour and you run a particular test path, that you would find this bug. And it may be critical and they don't have a way of handling it, but it's maybe happened twice. Is that something where you just think, I know I'm gonna write it up, I know they're not gonna fix it, it's affected one person in the 12 years we've been around.
Yeah, it's a
Would
high,
you write that up?
it's effectively a high severity, a low.
Low priority.
I don't even know if I'd call it high severity, because it's
Right,
a
'cause
certain,
it's
it's a certain state condition that's affected one person in the whole time that the company's been around. You've looked through the log files and you just know. That, for me, I wouldn't write it up because it has happened one time in a specific instance, it hasn't happened again, and it's certain things like a job has to run at the same time or something,
Sure.
I wouldn't write it up.
It depends on who it happens to.
Exactly, who is that one person?
But if that's,
How
one
much do they
person's a
matter?
CEO, that changes.
Yeah,
Then that matters.
That
But now they
changes.
have to meet that condition
Of
again,
course.
and
Right.
it has to happen again, and guess what? Now they can't reproduce it.
Like when your CEO uses an iPad and only 1% of your customers do.
To visit your
You
website?
have to,
Yeah.
you have to use test an iPad, because he does.
Yeah.
You know what
I
the
work at that
metrics?
company.
Your
Yeah,
analytics.
so do I.
I think one thing you come up
And the
with,
bugs for
though,
the
it's
iPad
crazy.
will never be
It's
fixed.
not
Yes.
efficient.
Because no one will fix the bug.
No one will
It's-
fix the bugs for
It's
the
not
iPad.
efficient.
His
one,
dad doesn't have one.
one thing to
Yeah,
consider,
Jeff doesn't have an iPad.
one
No.
thing to consider is
Can I-
if you do report these
Did you
bugs,
get
it
any
may
back
not
from
have
John?
a
No,
lot
I
of
haven't.
importance. Are you losing credibility?
He might have.
So
I
then you
disagree.
earlier.
I would
I'm not
really
actually
put
made
it.
her- made him tired.
I don't know.
Thank you,
it's-
Adam.
Yeah, yeah, well,
But,
credibility with who?
I don't know, it's kind of like crying wolf a little bit at some point.
I guess I'm looking at my scenario happen.
Oh, nice.
Nobody can reproduce it.
Right.
I can't even
Ah,
reproduce
right,
it.
right.
I don't even know how they got that, but that is, but now we know behind the
Reproducibility
scenes that's
does
how
play
it
into
happened.
Let's
it.
go on.
Well, we're done. I wanted to just pass a message on from John. He says hi to everybody, and James is with him. So
Hi, John.
I expect much of you.
Nice
so-
job.
No, thank you.
Right before you go.
Oh, we gotta have a drawing.
Now the tradition is
Harming immigration process.
All right.
Use my reference. Thanks a lot.
The winner is Kathy Sullivan. Yay!
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Still some pizza left if you're still hungry, so.
Presenter said, have you had your developers code assembly before? It didn't say assembly testing, that's why. Assembly testing does make
We don't have one.